Hi, it's Sandra here from Creating Spain, and I'm fresh from the operating theatre. Nah, actually, I'm kidding. I have my latex gloves on because I'm dealing with markers. Now, as it happens, I had a marker which had not only dried out, but I'd wrecked the tip. I don't know how I did it, but I did manage to wreck the tip. And it wasn't very clever, and I couldn't really use it, so I decided I wasn't going to lose anything by taking it to pieces. So that's what I decided to do. I'm just going to bring in a bit closer. There we go. Okay, so I'm talking about these markers, and I don't advise it if you've got brand new markers that are working because you might just happen to wreck them, but you know, if you've got one that isn't, like I did, you won't. Now, I've wondered for a while exactly what they were like inside, so I decided to find out. And I've already remedied this one by swapping out. I had a pen which had a brush tip and it was empty, so I decided to cannibalise that one, and I've actually swapped out the nib, so I've got this nib in here now which works fine. But I thought I'd show you how they come apart and what they're like inside. So here's one I've taken apart earlier. Literally this grey part pulls off. Now it does not pull off easily. What I used on the first one, I did manage to put it off with my hand, but what I used this time round was a pair of pliers and some tissue to pull the thing off, because this one was really quite stiff. And as it happens, I've managed to wreck the tip of this one as well. As I really don't know why, but it's not a very good tip on it these days. But it's not one that I'm worried about. This is a fluorescent one, and basically if I wrecked this, I couldn't care less. But I thought I'd show you what the inside is like, so here we go. You have on the inside just a tube which has got some kind of foam or something in it. It just looks a bit like a felt almost. Yeah, looks a bit felt-like, but basically a thick tube. Now, if ever you want to replace this, I suggest a chunky drinking straw. These are the ones that they sell for milkshakes and things. And that is pretty much the same diameter as the one that is coming out of there at the moment. Now in this particular case, as you can see, there's not an awful lot of moisture coming out of here. I can tap it on here and squeeze it, and there's very little coming out. So that would be why the pen itself doesn't actually run very freely. Now you might notice that I didn't take off the other end, and it will actually put some marks down. I didn't take off this. I don't think that this end is actually removable. I think this end is moulded in, but obviously you can pull the actual nib out, but I believe that's a moulded end, and this end is the only end that you can remove, so it's the grey end that you would remove. So if this is really well and truly dry, you have two choices. You can either get some of the appropriate coloured ink to re-ink it, or if you don't have that, you could use food colouring. You know, if you're not bothered about the shade, you could use food colouring in there. If you are quite happy that it's going to be a paler version of what it was, then you can just use normal rubbing alcohol, this stuff. Okay, that's all I use to top up my pens. Generally speaking, what I've done before is I have taken the nib out and I've just either injected or dropped in the alcohol. But if you've got this much filling to actually get moist, then a few drops of alcohol is not quite going to cut it. So what I would suggest is either you take your alcohol and you drop it in while you are still holding it, and I can actually see that alcohol working its way down through the sponge, but it's not the easiest way of doing it. So the easier way of doing it is to get a shot glass or something similar. So I would put some alcohol in there, and then I would use a dropper or a syringe to put the alcohol into the pen. So I'm just going to draw up, it hasn't got a needle on this syringe, I'm just going to draw up the alcohol like so. And then it can be syringed into the tube like so, or alternatively you can keep it in the shot glass. You can put the sponge into the shot glass and it will absorb the alcohol. Now obviously if you're going to do this, it's going to be considerably paler than it was to start with. You can also, if you want to, you can also put your nibs in the alcohol and then refill your tube, because that will ensure that the dye or the ink is distributed into here a bit more easily than this is. As you can see from here, it's got various strengths all the way through at the moment. Now that will even out over time if it's left on its side like that. So yeah, if you're going to do that, don't store your pen vertically for the time being. So that can go back in there, push it well in, and then this can go back on here and the nib can go back in. Now if I take this one off here and I pull the nib out, you can see that that bit there is paler at the moment, so it is getting some of that fluid through to it. It'll take a little while for it to even itself out, but that is one way of doing it, and obviously you need to clean up your pen afterwards. I think probably the better way of doing it is to make sure that you put your nibs in the alcohol and then refill it with the ink that comes out of it. So that will go back in there, and then that will start to get nice and inked up again. And you see why I've worn gloves, obviously. So to clean up your pen, a little bit more alcohol, and you can take all the excess off. So there we go, that's what it's like inside one of these markers. Just thought you might like to know because, well, it's just interesting. Thanks for watching, take care now, bye bye.